Do you have to be saved to serve in church? How do we take someone from salvation to leadership? What does it really mean to make mature disciples when all I see are babies all around me? Well, welcome to the Fresh Church Podcast. I'm Pastor Tony, and we have an incredible episode planned for you today. Let's talk about spiritual maturity. So this episode works for anyone who is in the church world. If you're a lead pastor or serving a role that disciples adults, this is for you. In fact, if you're a kids director or youth pastor, well, this is for you also, because you work not only with students, but their parents, a team of adult volunteers, people in the church who need maturity. So today in our conversation, we're going to look at the different levels of spiritual maturity. We're going to talk about how to move people into mature discipleship. And we're going to be talking about volunteers. What a great way to jump into this, right? So I want to start by establishing what you already know to be the case, that Christians come in different packages, we know that there are spiritually immature and spiritually mature Christians out there. So I just want to read a couple verses to establish this. Hebrews 5:12-14. You've been believers so long now that you ought to be teaching others. Instead, you need someone to teach you again the basic things about God's word. You are like babies who need milk and cannot eat solid food. For someone who lives on milk is still an infant and doesn't know how to do what is right. Solid food is for those who are mature, who through training have the skill to recognize the difference between right and wrong. 1 Peter 2:2-3. Like newborn babies, you must crave pure spiritual milk so that you will grow into a full experience of salvation. Cry out for this nourishment now that you have had a taste of the Lord's kindness. Then we look at 1 Corinthians 13:11. When I was a child, I spoke and thought and reasoned as a child. But when I grew up, I put away childish things. And then let's look at Ephesians 4:14-15. Then we will no longer be immature like children. We won't be tossed and blown about by every wind of new teaching. We will not be influenced when people try to trick us with lies so clever they sound like the truth. Instead, we will speak the truth in love, growing in every way more and more like Christ, who is the head of his body, the church. So we can see within the New Testament that it's very clear that you don't get saved and boom, you're a mature believer. We know there's a maturing process. So as a guy who's done family ministry for a lot of years, I look at the natural development we see within humans, and it truly reflects a lot of what we see spiritually. So let's walk through a child development process and see the similarities. A baby is born. That child starts off with the ability to do absolutely nothing, but be extremely needy. Change me, feed me, hold me, let me sleep. As that child grows, they begin to learn just the basic things. Everything is an adventure. Like, what's this hole in the side of my head as they stick their finger in their ear? What is that smell? What is that noise? What is all this stuff around me? This preschooler is selfish, thinking only of themselves. Their capacity cannot include anything other than take care of my needs and take care of me. They're learning to play with others, but only because they have to. They're excited about everything and complain about everything. Self-control is beginning to be taught as they discover potty training, real cups instead of bottles, walking instead of being carried everywhere. Life is expanding at every level. This is so similar to the growing life of a new convert. A person gets saved and now what? They have questions. They're trying to figure it out. They need a lot of attention and they will make messes along the way. They need a parent, a spiritual adult to help them out. Yet I know a family that they're not properly matured their children. At 5, their son still uses a diaper. And this isn't because he has any medical or mental conditions that limit him. It's because the parents are lazy. He only eats mac and cheese with no nutritional value. He throws fits and gets whatever he wants. He's old enough to be in kindergarten, but cannot even identify the letters of the alphabet. I'm not making this up. He's been left to develop on his own, and obviously it's not working. Are you doing that with the new believers in your church? Are you celebrating their spiritual birth and then just leaving them there to figure it out for themselves? I mean, well, it's a lot of work to change their diapers and get all the waste out of their lives. It's tough to force feed them nutritional food and ensure they're getting what they need, not just what they want. It requires time, and more time. If your church prays with them, baptizes them, and then leaves them in their spiritual crib hoping for the best, you're failing as a parent. There's a reason that when Jesus left, he specifically told his followers to go and make disciples. He didn't say, go get them all saved. He instructed that they needed to count the cost and help those new believers grow. There needed to be more to help them as they became young children. And people wonder if the person was really saved who came to church, who prayed, who hung out for a couple of months and then vanished. But all you did was greet them at the door and maybe say hi after service as you rush to get your kids. We have to start with at least some spiritual milk. Next, those Christians begin to mature and realize there's so much more to this spiritual experience. It's kind of like older kids or adolescents. In the natural, as kids get older, they begin to explore. They want to know what is out there and try it. They check out different sports and activities. They begin to make friends. They learn about social acceptance and embarrassment. They begin to challenge the system a little and want to know more than the minimum. They begin to ask, why? Sounds a lot like a maturing Christian. They move beyond the faith basics and they fall in love with the Bible. They start to volunteer in different areas of the church. They attend Bible studies and small groups and ministry breakfasts. They question one of the sermon points and start digging to discover the real answer for themselves. They worship with abandonment and begin to tell others about their church. When we see people here, often the church runs them as hard as they can, promotes them without training, and burns them out. When they ask questions, they're told that, well, we've always done it this way. They struggle through this maturity process and often stall out or switch churches. So how do we engage this spiritual development? You have to put together a plan for this. Do you have classes and groups and opportunities specifically for these individuals who are seeking more? That this isn't a faith basics course or a why we go to church conversation. This is developing deeper understanding of who Jesus is. This is exploring worship at a level beyond just singing songs. This is giving them the opportunity to get more involved and serve in areas in the church. More importantly, this is where we find out what their spiritual gifts are and let them run with that lane. Many traditional churches will have a Sunday school class or Wednesday night experience where they'll do Bible studies. These are great for that emerging adolescent, but there's more. Yes, we can talk them through the book of Romans, but there has to be opportunity to explore the why we do things and don't do things. There has to be an outlet for them to ask tough questions and find a mentor who will speak into their life. Just like a teen still needs parents and adults around them, this age of spiritual maturity still needs others to disciple them. And here's where most churches stop. They get a new believer into a basic class, encourage a growing believer to attend more classes and events, and then we just continue promoting attending church on Sunday. Jesus didn't stop there. Jesus didn't call Peter, James, and John and say, follow me and I'll teach you how to be a good church attender. What did he say? I will make you fishers of men. I will teach you how to do what I do. You will not only see people saved and grow in their faith, we're going to teach you how to develop others. A spiritually mature person has the ability to duplicate themselves like a parent. Now, not every parent goes into this knowing what's happening, but they have to figure it out quick. Every kid's different. Every situation is unique, and it requires a lot of time and resources. But most parents will say that raising a child was one of the most fulfilling elements in their lives. It's the same thing with raising a believer into a mature Christian. It's hard work, but the reward is incredible. Okay, so let's recap. Baby Christian growing into childhood, adolescence, until they become a parent themselves. In Fresh, we place people into 4 primary categories when it comes to spiritual development: invitation, activation, acceleration, and duplication. Let's look at those 4. Invitation. It starts with connecting with people before they are saved, helping people understand that we love them and accept them regardless of their willingness to join our church or not. People are lost, fallen, and in need of God. But before many of them will ever make that decision, they encounter a person first who shows them unconditional love that can only happen from having a relationship with the Father and being part of God's family. We start by building relationships with unsaved people who are on their way to a relationship with God. We invite them to our house or out to dinner. We help their family become part of our family. You have coffee with them individually and begin to develop relationships. You invite them to the church experience and let them see that we aren't all crazy on Sunday mornings. We show them that Jesus is safe and we aren't just out to get everybody's money and force them into a religious cult. We share the hope of Jesus with them. More importantly, that God has a plan for them and a place where they can fit in. And somewhere along this process, they make the decision to follow Jesus. They decide to become a Christian. And you celebrate it in the tradition of your church and your culture. Another person has come into relationship with God, or as John 3 says, is born again. We have a baby Christian. Now what? Invitation, activation. They've made the choice. Now we need to activate their faith. Luckily, we don't have to create a nursery for them and monitor them 24/7, but we do need to put some serious and focused attention into discipling them. You can't just push them out the door and say, good luck. Now what? I mean, what do we do? Well, we keep using the fresh philosophy. We get them into a small group where they learn about the value of being in the church family. We teach on unity and being there for others. We do individual discipleship and walk them through what it means to have an identity in Christ. They need to understand what it means to be adopted into God's family while building a friendship with a leader in your church through a relational discipleship plan. They need to attend church and experience what it's like to be around other believers, to learn basic elements through a weekend experience. They need to discover that they believe by being in a safe environment that teaches basic spiritual disciplines, such as reading your Bible, praying, giving, evangelism, etc. Along with that, we need to find a place to plug them into serving in the church. They need to get a little exercise in as they continue to grow. So we see them begin to go from walking to running, from spiritual milk to hungry for some steak, from just being happy about Jesus to wanting to do more. They're growing up. And as they move into this spiritual adolescence, we need to start the next process: invitation, activation, acceleration. Their faith has been activated, and now they see the value in making a difference. Notice that we use this word acceleration because if you do not engage them at this point, instead of accelerating, they get passive or dormant in their faith. When I was a kid, there was a song out there called Fat Little Babies. Let's keep our Christians from falling into that category. So we have them helping more with small groups and doing family-focused elements. Now they might be hosting or organizing the dinner part of that. They might even be leading the discussion. These groups move beyond the basic virtues of the Bible, explore how to truly walk in love, how to grow families, marriages, and care for hurting people. They're still growing relationally, but now they're discovering what it means to know who God is. They're learning core devotional elements and making their daily walk a priority. They've begun to meet with others as well and speak into their lives, and they're making more friends. They're actively participating in church and serving wherever needed. They engage with the people around them and make attendance a priority. They dig deeper into the theological aspects of their relationship, and they want the reason why your church believes what it does. Maybe they become a member and explore elements like the Trinity, basic doctrines, eschatological elements. They're learning not to be tossed by every teaching out there, but understand the safety of knowing what the Bible actually says. They're taking a spiritual gifts test and seeing the call of God on their life when it comes to serving. They aren't just randomly signing up to help as needed. They're stepping out and making an impact. They're understanding that there comes a confident hope when they practice their faith. But it can't end there. Teenagers grow up, and for many of them, they become parents. I'm not trying to promote that everyone out there needs to get married and have kids. What I'm saying, though, is that as we mature in our faith, there's a point where we need to take on the responsibility to help others mature. We call that duplication. So there's invitation, activation, acceleration, and duplication. This is where we do what Jesus tells us to do and develop disciples who can continue to develop disciples. This isn't leading a small group, a mentoring experience, a worship leader, a classroom teacher, or even being in charge of kids' church. This is developing others to do what you are doing now. This is replacing yourself so that God can use you in another element, in a higher way, or in the next step in your own maturing process. So I've trained a person in my small group to take over the group and start another one. I coach others how to lead relational discipleship and help them impact others one-on-one. I develop someone else to oversee the ministry that I have on Sundays. I teach someone else how to run sound, usher, teach kids' church, or lead worship. I replace myself. I discovered that the next teacher is, and we teach a class together until I'm comfortable enough to release them to teach the next membership class. I discover how to use my gifts to equip the saints and grow the church accordingly so that others can find the confident hope of understanding what God has called them to do in the kingdom. It starts with an invitation. They discover who Jesus is and they make the decision to follow him. Then comes the activation, where we help them understand what it means to be a Christian and how to go full speed in this new calling. There's an acceleration as their faith grows to make a bigger impact, to launch new ministry ideas and discover what God wants them to do with their lives. Then the duplication process begins as we develop more leaders and release some of the areas we're currently overseeing so we can oversee those who oversee. Okay, are you tracking with all of this? So in my last couple of minutes, I want to bring the whole thing home. Let's make it practical, specifically when it comes to ministry, specifically with volunteers. So I was doing a coaching call this week, and I asked the leader that I was on the phone with to go through their volunteers and tell me the names of a couple of people in each of these 4 categories. And it came out of a conversation of how mature do you have to be in order to serve? So let's start at the initial point. Can a person who's unsaved in the invitation stage serve? Well, let me back up. When Jesus multiplied the bread and the fish and he fed the 5,000 plus the women and the children, were the disciples saved? I mean, technically, salvation as we know it wasn't available yet. Jesus had not died and come back to life, but they were probably in a right standing with God. I mean, Jesus was at least recognized as a rabbi, if not Messiah. More importantly, did they have to be saved to walk around with some baskets and give food to people? I mean, Jesus already did the miracle. They just helped. So let me ask you, does a person have to be saved to change diapers, point cars to where they need to park, clean up after an event, help an outreach experience in your city? I would say no. I mean, do your due diligence, especially if they're around minors, but the answer is no. So give people a place to serve even before they're saved. Let them experience the hope that people have when they're serving. It helps them not only become part of the family, but get connected with other believers and draw them closer to that initial salvation point. So they get saved. Can they serve now? Of course. In fact, one of the best ways to help a new convert realize they need to grow in their relationship is to have them serve. They get asked a question or they see something they don't understand, and out come the questions. As they ask questions, they grow in their faith. Yes, we want them serving, and let them serve in multiple areas. Let them discover the places they enjoy and the places that they don't. Let them serve in kids, youth, Sunday church experiences, behind the scene activities, any place they want to. Kind of like a kid discovering what sport they're good at. Now they're growing. Let's walk them through a spiritual gifts test that confirms that they have already started to discover, that they now realize where in the church they can use their gifts of hospitality or mercy, how being an usher is evangelist in nature, how they can love to teach, have great faith, are excited to use their administrative gifts. It's funny that in a church world, we like to use the word leadership, even though it's only mentioned one time out of the 3 different lists of gifts that the Bible gives us. People do not have to be leaders to serve in ministry, but realizing that as they serve, they're an example to the other believers, which in turn makes them a leader. They have an area that they love. They're doing a great job, and we're so thankful that they're there. So now what? Well, we teach them how to develop others, how to duplicate themselves. My question, if you, in your current position, were to feel the Spirit move you into a different area of ministry, or if you had to move for some reason, who would take your place? You should have a name. If not, you're not properly working in the leadership position and responsibility that you have to replace yourself, to duplicate yourself. I've always believed that I need to raise up leaders to take my place so I'm available to be used wherever God needs me next. And I've discovered that as I raise up leaders, God expands the capacity of our ministry and it grows exponentially because there are others who can keep inviting, activating, accelerating, and duplicating themselves in our local ministry and church. Disciple your people and watch your church grow. Take that baby Christian and see them become the leader God has called them to be. It's a simple process that sees lives transformed. Invitation, activation, acceleration, and duplication. With these simple steps, you can disciple others and watch your church grow. With these steps, you can keep your ministry fresh.